Friends, you're a bunch of nerds. It's okay, this is a safe space. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. I am eternally grateful for that, and I am a lifelong nerd myself. I have devoted my life to nerdy pursuits and even managed to convert non-traditionally nerdy activities like sports and beer into full-on nerd activities. And it's never been a better time to be a nerd. Playing a B-level Marvel Comics character made Robert Downey Jr. one of the most famous and appreciated and wealthy people on the planet. Everybody and their mother suddenly loves Star Wars. Glasses are now considered to be sexy as hell.
You're goddamn right.
Anime has never been more mainstream. Some of the most popular and influential people on social media are cosplayers. Nerds are everywhere. We have taken over, and dad bods are in. Dad bods are still in, right? Welcome aboard Space Castle, where our continuing mission is to search the universe for all things nerdy. I'm your Captain DT, and I've been a nerd since birth, you've been a nerd since birth, and the rest of the world is only just now catching up on how rad and cool being a nerd actually is. And you, dear viewer, are poised to lead the way because you've been about that life forever. You can be Alpha Nerd, a nerd supreme, extra hot sauce, hold the onions, the cream of the crop, you rise to the top.
I never ate a pig because a pig is a cop.
That's my bad. That's my bad. I got you all riled up. I apologize.
Are you trying to play me out like as if my name was Saga?
Let's just get back to the topic at hand. It's never been a better time to be a nerd. Nerds have never been cooler or sexier in the eyes of everybody else, and it's time to level up that nerd game, nerds. And you can do that by picking up and mastering these 5 skills and leveling up into Nerd Prime. And here are those 5 skills. First off, learn to cook. Now I know what you're thinking, Mountain Dew and ordering pizza is a part of your nerd lifestyle. And it still can be. But space that out with some nutritious and delicious meals that'll make you feel better, give you more energy, start to make you look more attractive, and make you feel great about yourself. Social media is chock full of easy, super tasty recipes that you can make on the fly or quickly and easily in batches for meal planning throughout the week. And it's actually fun. Think of all the hours you've spent crafting in games and that endorphin hit of leveling up and crafting that piece of armor you've been grinding after. Measure that up against being able to make a meal that tastes great, didn't take that long to make, and makes you look like a badass in front of your friends, family, and your significant other. Or significant others? It could be as simple and easy as an egg and turkey burrito for that week's breakfast that'll give you energy and help keep you trim and sexy because you'll be satisfied until well after lunchtime. Or it could be a perfectly pan-fried steak and some delicious Brussels sprouts, and yes, god damn it, Brussels sprouts can be delicious if you know how to cook them. You know what I used to hate as a kid? I used to hate pork chops because I never had a good one. And then I became an adult, I started adulting and doing adult things, and on a whim, I tried out a proper pork chop recipe that looked really good on the internet, and I fell in love with them. I discovered a food I never knew I could like while developing a skill I didn't have before. And when you start to get good at it, you'll find tricks to minimize the cleanup afterwards, and you'll reduce the amount of time you'll have to spend doing something we all freaking hate, the dishes. Cooking teaches you patience, the ability to multitask, care for yourself by nurturing and loving yourself, and it teaches you efficiency too. Learn to cook, nerds! I guarantee you will love it. Now next up, you gotta learn the difference between Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign, and you gotta learn how to use them. We live in a day and age where graphic design skills have never been more valuable, more marketable, and more misunderstood. And I'm gonna share some knowledge here despite being a career graphic designer myself who makes his living doing it, at least until Space Castle takes off and I become internet famous and I make my living doing this. The big 3 Adobe programs, Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign, each have their own specific purpose. They're really good for those respective purposes, and chances are you're using them wrong, even if you have an art degree. I have known professional graphic designers who make their living doing graphic design, and they're doing it wrong too. This is a safe space. There is no shame here. Photoshop is for photo editing and touching up images and doing raster or pixel-based graphics and creating accent imagery for your web design and stuff like that. It's okay for simple animations too, but where it lives and dies is in image-centric design and editing. You do not want to use Photoshop to create flyers, advertising design, or any sort of print layout or logo design, especially not logo design. You want to use Illustrator for your logo design and illustrations meant for print. Why? Because Illustrator is vector-based and everything you create with it can be scalable without pixelizing it like Photoshop does. So what's the difference? Raster or pixel images Photoshop deals with are generated by colored pixels that contain a finite amount of information. When you take something you drew or painted in Photoshop and you blow it up to like 200% the size or more, those pixels have to increase in size and decrease in clarity in order to stretch and still convey the same amount of information. Gaps in that information have to be filled in, and that's why everything starts to look boxy and blurry. Vector graphics are made up by paths generated by mathematical formulas that control and direct the route between anchors in your image. This allows you to bend and shape a vector image, including resizing it to fit a t-shirt, a poster, or even a huge banner, without sacrificing any of the visual information. Now, it takes a lot of time and work and practice to create a really complex and detailed vector image, but that image can be as gigantic or tiny as you want without ever becoming blurry or pixelated. Now, a lot of people, even accomplished graphic designers, are nervous about Illustrator and learning it, but it's by far the best tool to create scalable graphics, really cool text graphics for your print or web projects, and once you wrap your head around how vectors work and how to manipulate them, you're gonna feel like Tony Stark discovering time travel. And you're gonna open up your graphic design skills tenfold and be able to do some really, really cool stuff. Now, InDesign is where you're going to take all the neat stuff you made in Photoshop and Illustrator and implement it in the best possible ways for your print projects. Now, I said before that you don't want to create your flyers and brochures and posters and banners in Photoshop, and I meant it. Like Illustrator, InDesign is vector-based, meaning that your text and the shapes you create with it are going to be crystal clear and sharp as hell no matter how big or small you make them. And InDesign handles the scaling of raster and pixel-based images better than Photoshop too. And finally, it's just simply the best tool for layout design because of the ample artboard space to work with, the systems it contains for pagination, and the ease with which you can access, edit, and arrange layers. Now, I know a lot of people use Illustrator for layout design because it's also vector-based, but man, that is like digging a hole with a snow shovel instead of a spade. You're gonna get there, but it's gonna take way less time and effort if you just use the tool made for the job. Illustrator is not as user-friendly as InDesign for layout design, and I've always honestly personally found the way it manages layers and groups to be unwieldy for such projects as pagination layout. So, you create your rad illustrations and accent pieces in Illustrator, you create your main image in Photoshop, and you put it all together in a beautiful package in InDesign. Now, once you get deeper into how all three programs play and intermingle together, you're gonna skyrocket in terms of design skill. You're gonna make yourself so much more attractive and impressive to clients, potential employers, and your graphic design buddies. And I'm sure you've all noticed that I haven't mentioned Canva, and I have a really good reason for that. Canva. And ironically, my next tip is to learn how to argue gracefully. Now, we nerds pride ourselves on being intelligent, knowledgeable people. We also tend to stay in our bubbles, and we like to surround ourselves with people who like the same things we do, dislike the same things we dislike, and generally make our existences as turbulent-free as possible. And if we want to fight about something, we go to Reddit. But the nerdy landscape is wide open now, and millions upon millions more people are now interested in the same stuff that we are interested in. And with that is going to come a need for all new ways to communicate, welcome newbies into the fold, and become more accepting of their terrible, terrible tastes. And I love a really good debate. And that there is the key word, debate. I believe that any conversation worth having is one in which both sides express their respective opinions and feelings, and the other person is open to either learning and growing and having their opinions challenged, or at the very least, they're willing to be tolerant, accept that not everybody has their same taste, and support the other person in their feelings and opinions. And that's not the easiest thing to do when you're super passionate about something like Star Wars or music or anime, or whether pineapple belongs on pizza. It f***ing doesn't. And you view yourself as something of a legitimate authority on a subject you've studied long and hard for a large portion of your life. But most of the stuff we as nerds devote our time, money, and passion towards is largely subjective. Our feelings on them are based on our own personal experience and how that one thing resonates with us. It's entirely emotional and abstract, and how we personally feel about it doesn't inherently make it good or bad. Except for pineapple on pizza, that shit is objectively awful. Once you realize that most of the stuff we nerds are into is subjective, then it becomes much easier to debate or discuss them without getting heated or personally insulted. I know it's hard to understand why somebody would hate something that's been so influential and important to you as a person, or why somebody could love something that almost single-handedly tore down something you've loved for almost your entire life. But them's the breaks, nerds. Instead of trying to argue and defend something with empirical evidence or objective talking points, try explaining to the other person how something makes you feel and why it's special to you. And try not to make any one thing the basis for your identity. That kind of thinking creates rigidity, and overly rigid things will inevitably snap in the form of getting pissed off and saying something insulting to the other person, and just coming off as someone incapable of engaging in healthy debate. It's really fun to talk about movies and music and comics and all the other stuff we as nerds love when you don't feel like you're trying to defend yourself in the conversation. Try it. And next up, develop social skills and confidence. Now let me rephrase this better. Realize that you are cool. Harness that coolness and be viewed as a badass and somebody other people want to be around, because you are. You just might not realize it yet. Here is a little bit of backstory. Growing up, I had acute social anxiety. Not like I was a shy kid, like I was afraid to leave the house. I was even afraid to sneeze in class. I had a handful of really good friends that I had and still have since I was 8 years old, but I was never ever the social butterfly. I was barely capable of having a conversation for fear of being judged, saying something stupid, or everybody thinking I was weird. It was debilitating. It wasn't until about my junior year in high school where I decided I wanted to check out local shows around town. The radio stations back in Phoenix, Arizona were actually pretty good about playing local bands, and one or two caught my attention. So I rounded up my modest but awesome group of friends from school and my younger sister, and we started going to all ages shows around Phoenix and Tempe. And I really liked it. Something awakened in me. I jumped into circle pits once I realized that nobody inside or outside the pit was focused on anything besides hitting each other or avoiding being hit. You could dance, you could jump around, you could scream and slam into people without fear of judgment, and you felt amazing afterwards. And I started taking it a step further. I couldn't tell you how or why, but I forced myself to start approaching the bands after their gigs and just saying things like, "Hey man, great show, you guys were awesome." But after a little while, the bands started recognizing me. They started coming up to me, this chubby, awkward kid who was afraid of his own shadow, and asking me how I was and thanking me for coming out. And then I started getting invited to after parties and becoming friends with these people I was honestly terrified to talk to at first. And friends, here is something I learned very quickly. Those people you look up to as heroes. Okay, all right, hang on. This is gonna blow your mind. So let's take a moment to prepare yourself mentally. Those musicians, those actors, those athletes you idolize, they're goddamn nerds. You know that guitar player or drummer who's covered in tattoos and is really good at playing? They are the nerd who stayed home on Friday nights, spending hours and hours studying and learning and practicing. Also because they had all those tattoos and they couldn't afford to do anything else on a Friday, but that's besides the point. That really talented athlete who you know is going to make it big or already has, they have forsaken so many social gatherings and chances to party it up to have their noses in a playbook or running drills or they're watching games or watching game tape. If being hyper-focused and intense about your passion is a definition of nerdy, then the people you look up to as being the best at what they do are the nerdiest people on the planet. And don't even get me started on actors. Those folks are the weirdest, goofiest, most awkward people ever.
I get nervous that I'm going to say something, and then I'm nervous. I'm like, whoop, I better drink. That doesn't help.
And they harness that goofiness and that energy into performing. What I'm getting at is you are no less cool than anyone else around you. It takes a lot of fear, a lot of practice, and straight up looking silly sometimes. But once you realize that everybody in the world is a nerd about something, that everybody has insecurities and dreams that they keep guarded, you will realize that there is nothing to be afraid of in your nerdiness. And once you realize that, the confidence is gonna start to set in. And I'm not saying that confidence is gonna suddenly give you the ultimate swagger. That's people faking it. What's going to come is your genuine self coming out, you owning it without thinking about it or worrying about it. You're gonna find yourself comfortable in conversations with other people. You're gonna be okay in social situations, and you're gonna find yourself striking up conversations without even thinking about it. And you can f***ing harness that into doing whatever it is you want to do. Use that nerdy confidence in job interviews, in talking to somebody you're attracted to, into being pulled up on stage and singing in front of 1,200 people like I did numerous times as a kid struggling with social anxiety. Get out there, nerd, and show them what you've got. I guarantee you it's a lot, and people are going to really dig it. And this last skill that every nerd should know about is gonna bake your noodle. It's gonna expand your consciousness. It's gonna change the very fabric of your soul. You will never be the same. I hope you're prepared. I'm gonna teach you how to plug a USB cable in correctly on the first try every time. Every single USB plug has a USB logo on it. If the USB port is horizontal, then make sure the USB logo is pointing up. And if the plug is vertical, make sure the USB logo is facing you. Boom! There it is. You're f***ing welcome. I just changed your life. Space Castle. And that's about it. 5 very achievable and life-altering skills that every nerd should have in this bold, new, nerd-centric world we find ourselves in. It's a weird and confusing time, but it's the perfect time for nerds like us to come into their own and be a shepherd for everybody else finally discovering the things that we've loved for so long. Go forth, young nerds, and cook a delicious meal. Shock and delight the world with your new graphic design knowledge. Go get into a debate and feel good about it afterwards. Become the life of the party and find your power and confidence. And never, ever jam that USB plug in the wrong way ever again. What are some other skills that every nerd should have? Hit up the comment section below and drop some knowledge, or come hang out on the Space Castle Discord. There's always a link in the episode description. And while you're at it, why not jump aboard the Galactonaut crew at patreon.com/spacecastleshow. These excellent folks have done so, and they've increased their nerdy power tenfold. As always, thanks for watching and helping the Space Castle's continuing mission to explore the universe for all things nerdy. Be sure to share this video with a friend and come back for the next one. In the meantime, this is your Captain DT, signing off.